I never thought much about mail delivery until Dylan started working in our building. I'm Nathan, by the way, and I work on the 7th floor of a pretty standard corporate office building in Seattle. The kind of place where everyone knows the coffee schedule better than they know their co-workers' names. I'd been there for about 2 years, doing data analysis for a tech consulting firm, and honestly, most days blurred together in a comfortable monotony of spreadsheets and standing meetings. The mailroom guy before Dylan was this older man named George, who would speed through his rounds like he was training for the Olympics. He'd drop the mail on your desk, maybe grunt a hello, and be gone before you could even look up from your screen. That was fine. I never needed conversation during mail delivery. But then George retired, and Dylan showed up, and suddenly I found myself looking forward to 2:30 every afternoon. The first time I really noticed him was on his 3rd day. He came to my desk last on the floor, which seemed weird because my desk was right by the elevator. It would have made more sense to start with me. He had this stack of interdepartmental envelopes and a couple of packages, and he set them down carefully on the corner of my desk, not just dropping them like George used to do. "You're Nathan, right?" he asked, and I looked up from my computer to find these incredibly warm brown eyes looking at me. He had dark hair that was slightly too long, falling over his forehead in a way that made him look younger than he probably was. He wore the standard mailroom polo, but somehow he made it look good, fitted just right across his shoulders. "Yeah, that's me," I said, probably sounding more surprised than I should have. Nobody in the building really used names unless they absolutely had to. "Cool, I'm Dylan. Just wanted to make sure I'm getting everything to the right people. Still learning everyone's faces." He smiled, and it was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that made my stomach do this weird little flip that I immediately tried to ignore. "You're doing fine," I told him, and then he left, and I sat there staring at my screen without actually seeing anything on it for a solid 5 minutes. The next day, he came to my desk last again. This time, he had just a few envelopes for me, and he could have easily dropped them and moved on. Instead, he paused. "How's your day going?" he asked, and the thing was, he sounded like he actually wanted to know. Not the automatic, "How are you?" that people say in passing without expecting an answer. His tone was curious, open. "It's going," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Lot of numbers today. You know how it is." "I really don't," he laughed. "I'm terrible at math. That's probably why I ended up in the mailroom and not, anywhere near a spreadsheet." "The mailroom seems more interesting anyway," I found myself saying. "You get to move around, see people. I've been staring at this same screen for 4 hours." "Want to trade?" he offered, grinning. "You can deliver mail. I'll pretend to understand whatever that graph is." I glanced at my monitor, which was showing a particularly boring quarterly analysis. "Trust me, you're getting the better deal where you are." He laughed again, and it was such an easy, comfortable sound. We talked for maybe 3 minutes that day. Nothing deep, just surface-level stuff about work and the building, and how the coffee on the 3rd floor was somehow better than the coffee on every other floor. When he left, I realized I was smiling at my computer screen like an idiot. This became our pattern. Every day, Dylan would deliver to everyone else on the floor first, and then he'd come to my desk last, and every day, he'd stay a little longer. At first, it was just a few minutes of small talk. He'd ask about my work, and I'd ask about his day, and we'd joke about the various characters in the building. There was this guy on 5 who always tried to send personal packages through the company mail system. There was a woman on 3 who got flower deliveries every single Friday from her husband of 30 years. Dylan noticed everything, remembered details, told stories that made the mundane feel interesting. I started noticing things too. The way he'd lean against my desk partition when we talked, casual and comfortable. The way he'd run his hand through his hair when he was thinking. The way his whole face would light up when I said something that amused him. I noticed that he had a small scar above his left eyebrow, and I found myself wondering about the story behind it, but never quite brave enough to ask. After about 2 weeks of these daily conversations, I had to admit something to myself that I'd been trying very hard not to think about. I was looking forward to 2:30 every day, not because I cared about mail delivery, but because I wanted to see Dylan. I wanted to hear what he'd say, wanted to make him laugh, wanted those few minutes where someone seemed genuinely interested in talking to me. And that was terrifying, because I'd been down this road before. Not often, and never at work, but enough times to know what it felt like when attraction started turning into something more. I'd dated women in college, tried to make that work because it seemed like what I was supposed to do. It never felt quite right. Then in my mid-20s, I'd finally admitted to myself that I was more interested in men, had a few short relationships that fizzled out for various reasons. Nothing serious. Nothing that made me feel the way I was starting to feel when Dylan smiled at me. The problem was, I had no idea if Dylan was even interested in men. He never mentioned dating anyone, never brought up a girlfriend or boyfriend, kept his personal life pretty private during our chats. And I wasn't about to make things weird by reading into something that might just be friendliness. Maybe he talked to everyone like this. Maybe I was just the last stop on his route and he was naturally chatty. Maybe I was projecting my own feelings onto someone who was just being nice. But then things started to shift. Small things, subtle things, but enough to make me wonder. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into our daily conversations, Dylan showed up at my desk with my mail and a cup of coffee. "From the 3rd floor," he said, setting it down next to my keyboard. "You mentioned yesterday that you'd been too busy to get coffee, so I figured I'd grab you one." I stared at the cup, then at him. "You remembered that?" He shrugged, but there was color rising in his cheeks. "Yeah, you said you were running on empty. Thought you could use it." "Dylan, you didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he said quickly, and there was something in his voice, something softer than usual. Our eyes met, and for a second everything else in the office seemed to fade out. It was just him and me and this cup of coffee that he'd gone out of his way to bring me. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it for more than just the coffee. He stayed for almost 10 minutes that day, longer than usual. We talked about nothing important, but everything felt important. I learned that he was taking online classes at night, studying graphic design because he'd always been into art but never pursued it seriously. I told him about how I'd accidentally fallen into data analysis after graduating with a math degree and no clear plan. He told me about his roommate's terrible cooking. I told him about my sister's upcoming wedding that I was dreading because I'd have to dance at the reception. "You don't like dancing?" he asked. "I don't like being bad at dancing in front of people," I clarified. "Everyone's bad at wedding dancing," he said. "That's what makes it fun." Spoken like someone who's probably actually good at dancing. He grinned. "I'm adequate. My mom made me take ballroom classes in high school. I complained the entire time, but I learned enough to fake it." The image of Dylan in ballroom classes, probably gangly and teenage and annoyed, made me smile. That's actually kind of adorable. The word was out before I could stop it, and I felt my face heat up immediately. Adorable. What a thing to say. But Dylan didn't seem bothered. If anything, his smile got wider. "Yeah, well, 15-year-old me did not think so," he said, but his voice was warm, and he was still looking at me with those eyes that made it hard to think straight. After that day, the coffee became a regular thing. Every few days, Dylan would show up with a cup from the 3rd floor, always remembering how I took it. Black, no sugar, nothing fancy. And every time, I'd feel that same flutter in my chest, that same dangerous hope that maybe this meant something. We started texting too. It started innocently enough. He needed to confirm a package delivery to my desk, asked for my number to coordinate. But then, after the package was delivered, he didn't delete my number. That night, around 8, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "This is Dylan from work. Hope that's not weird. Just wanted to make sure the package had everything you needed." I saved his number immediately and wrote back, "All good, thanks for checking. Not weird at all." There was a pause, those 3 dots appearing and disappearing like he was writing and rewriting his message. Finally, "Cool. Have a good night, Nathan." Such a simple message, but I read it about 5 times before I went to sleep. The texting stayed casual at first. Memes about office life, comments about particularly interesting mail deliveries, questions about weekend plans. But gradually it became more. We'd text in the evenings after work, conversations that would stretch for hours. I learned that he loved terrible horror movies, the kind that were so bad they became funny. He learned that I was obsessed with cooking shows despite being a mediocre cook myself. We'd send each other songs we were listening to, articles we found interesting, random thoughts that didn't really matter but somehow felt important to share. And through all of this, I kept trying to figure out what we were doing. Were we becoming friends? Was this just friendly? Because it felt like more than that to me, but I couldn't be sure. The uncertainty was killing me, but I also didn't want to ruin what we had by pushing for clarity. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Friday afternoon, and the office was in that end-of-week lull where everyone was mentally checked out, but physically still present. Dylan came to my desk last, as always, but this time he looked nervous. He had my mail in his hands, but he wasn't making eye contact, and that was unusual for him. "Hey," I said, concerned. "Everything okay?" Yeah, he said quickly. Can I ask you something?" My heart started pounding. Of course. He set the mail down and then just stood there for a moment like he was gathering courage. Finally, he looked at me. "Do you want to hang out sometime? Like outside of work?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and uncertainty. I could feel everyone else on the floor pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. "I'd really like that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The relief on his face was immediate and obvious. "Yeah? Okay, cool. There's this art exhibit opening at the museum tomorrow night. I know it's kind of a weird first suggestion, but I've been wanting to check it out, and I thought maybe you'd want to come with me." An art exhibit. He wanted to take me to an art exhibit. Not a group hangout, not a casual drink with co-workers. Something that felt intentional. Something that felt like it might be a date. "I'd love to," I said, and his smile could have powered the entire building. We exchanged details quickly because people were definitely watching now, and then he left, and I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, unable to focus on anything except the fact that I was going to see Dylan outside of work, in a context that had nothing to do with mail delivery or office small talk. That night I texted him, "Looking forward to tomorrow." His response came immediately. "Me too, more than you know." I stared at that message for a long time, reading between the lines, hoping I was interpreting it correctly. The next evening, I changed my outfit 4 times before settling on jeans and a button-down that my sister had once told me made my eyes look good. I met Dylan outside the museum at 7, and when I saw him standing there in dark jeans and a fitted jacket, looking nervous and hopeful and absolutely gorgeous, I knew with complete certainty that this was a date. Not just hanging out. A date. "Hey," he said, and his smile was different than it was at work. More open, more vulnerable. "Hey yourself," I replied. The exhibit was interesting, a collection of contemporary pieces that gave us plenty to talk about and look at together. But honestly, I barely registered the art. I was too aware of Dylan next to me, the way we'd drift closer as we looked at each piece, the way our arms would brush accidentally and then not so accidentally, the way he'd lean in close to read the descriptions, his shoulder pressing against mine. Halfway through the exhibit, as we stood in front of a particularly abstract painting, Dylan spoke quietly. "I've been wanting to do this for weeks." "Do what?" I asked, even though I thought I knew. "This. Be here with you. Not at work, not with time limits, just this. I turned to look at him, and he was already looking at me. The museum was crowded, people moving around us, but it felt like we were alone. I've wanted this too, I admitted. I wasn't sure if you felt the same way. If this was just friendly or if it was something more. Dylan laughed softly. Nathan, I've been coming to your desk last every single day because I wanted to spend as much time with you as possible. I've been bringing you coffee and texting you and trying to work up the courage to ask you out for 3 weeks. I definitely feel the same way. Relief and joy flooded through me in equal measure. 3 weeks? Why didn't you say something sooner? Because I was terrified, he admitted. I didn't know if you were interested in guys, if you were interested in me, if I was reading everything wrong. And I didn't want to make things weird at work if I was completely off base. You weren't off base, I said. Not even a little bit. We left the museum shortly after that, both of us too distracted to focus on art anymore. We walked through the city, ending up at a quiet bar where we sat close together in a booth and talked for hours. Really talked about everything we'd been too careful to say at work. He told me about coming out to his family in college, how his parents had struggled at first but eventually came around. I told him about my own journey, the years of confusion and trying to fit into expectations before finally accepting myself. I knew I liked you from the first day, Dylan confessed, nursing his second beer. You looked up from your computer with this slightly annoyed expression, like you were in the middle of something important, but then you smiled at me, and it was this real, genuine smile. I thought, okay, I need to get to know this person. I thought you were just being friendly, I said. Professional. Good at your job. I am good at my job, he protested, laughing. But I definitely started taking longer routes to make sure I got to your desk last. And I may have volunteered for the 7th floor specifically once I knew where you worked. The thought of him rearranging his route just to spend more time with me made my chest feel warm. That's actually really sweet. I can be sweet, he said, and then more quietly, when it's someone I really like. We stayed at that bar until closing, and when we finally left, Dylan walked me to my car. We stood there in the parking garage, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. I really want to kiss you right now, Dylan said, his voice low and honest. Then why aren't you? I asked. He stepped closer, and my heart was racing, and then his hand was on my jaw, gentle and sure, and he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like we were both still making sure this was real. But then I kissed him back, and it deepened into something that felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Dylan was grinning. I've been wanting to do that for so long. You should have done it sooner, I told him. I'll make up for lost time, he promised. And he did. We started dating officially after that night, though we kept it quiet at work for a few weeks. Not ready to deal with office gossip. But it was impossible to hide how we felt completely. People started noticing that Dylan still came to my desk last, that we'd leave the building at the same time, that we'd show up on Monday mornings with matching coffee cups from the same cafe. Eventually, we stopped trying to hide it. When people asked, we were honest. We were together, and the world didn't end. Our co-workers were mostly supportive, or at least polite about it. HR confirmed we weren't violating any policies since we weren't in the same department or reporting structure. It's been 6 months now, and Dylan still delivers my mail last every day. But now, when no one's looking, he'll lean down and kiss my temple, or squeeze my shoulder, or slip a note into my mail that says something ridiculous and sweet. We've fallen into a rhythm that feels natural and right. He stays over at my place most nights, and my apartment that used to feel too quiet now feels full of life with his things scattered around. His terrible horror movies queued up on my TV, his laugh filling the rooms. I'm not saying everything is perfect. We have disagreements like any couple. He's messier than I am, which drives me crazy. I'm too rigid about schedules sometimes, which frustrates him. But we talk about it, we work through it, and every day I feel lucky that he decided to deliver my mail last, that he stayed to talk, that he was brave enough to ask me out when I was too scared to make the first move. Looking back, I can see all the moments I should have known. The way he'd light up when he saw me. The way he remembered small details about my life. The way he'd find excuses to touch my arm or stand close to me. All the signs were there, but I was too afraid to believe them. Now I don't have to wonder anymore. Now I know that when Dylan looks at me with those warm brown eyes, he's seeing someone he chose, someone he wants, someone he loves. And I get to look back at him the same way. Sometimes the best things in life come delivered to your desk last, wrapped up in a mail carrier's smile and the courage to stay and talk, day after day, until staying becomes everything.